midday in February on a foggy and green winter's day in Cooley, Loclo, in Point Reyes National Seashore. This is the kind of day you'd want to bundle up and explore nature for its quiet beauty. We're here with John Littleton in a most magical place. This is, how do you call the name of this?
In English, we call it a sweat lodge. In Miwok, it's called the Llama.
This is the place where ceremony and sweats took place for many thousands of years. John is a teacher and an anthropologist, and he spent, more than 30 years recalling the stories, myths, and legends that help us make sense of life. John, hi and welcome.
Thank you.
John, can you tell us what inspired you to become a storyteller?
I think I took my first storytelling class many years ago, and I did it because I was teaching kids, and I knew kids like stories. I'm not a performer. I can't even memorize a one-paragraph script, but I knew that I wanted to use storytelling as part of my teaching tool because I was so aware of how receptive kids are to storytelling.
Story then has a great value to you and to all of us. Can you tell us a little bit about what the value of a deep story is?
I think the value of a story is it communicates to a different part of the brain, a much more ancient part of the brain that evolved with us as we evolved language as a species. There's more receptivity to a well-told, well-structured story than there is to something you might read in a book or see in a movie. Those are stories too, but the storytelling seems to grab kids and receptive adults in a way a regular academic or book text doesn't have that power to excite the imagination and cause attention to be focused.
So story then it's a way to convey meaning in a way that we can feel something more deeply.
I think there's you might say a greater receptivity to storytelling than there is to other forms of communication. Perhaps because that's how we evolved, I would guess.
So with all your adventures, John, as a teacher of meaning, and if there's one time that comes to mind when you told a story and it really made a difference in someone's life or in the community, can you think of what that one special storytelling time was and share that with us?
I'll think of two, and they both go together. One time I was telling the hummingbird steals fire story to a group of anthropology graduate students in the roundhouse, which is a bigger version of the sweat lodge that we're sitting in right here. And as I was telling that story, a little hummingbird came flying in the passageway that leads to the main part of the structure of the temple and hovered there for about 30 seconds or so. The folks at the anthropology graduate students who were sitting there were, of course, awestruck and said, "How did you do that?" And I said, "I didn't do it. It's just the power of the story. It's the power of this sacred space that we're here experiencing at this moment. And the power of the sacred space is in itself a story that opens one up to a different realm of consciousness or different lens, a different perceptual field, a different neurological part of the brain."
So you said you had two stories?
Well, and the second part embodied in that story is not only were the graduate students struck by the power of the space and perhaps the story and the presence of the hummingbird, but in the version that I tell, hummingbird is a female who goes on this hero's journey to steal fire for the people. And in our day and age, we are, at least at this point, working on empowering women, young women in particular, kids as well as adults. So to have a female hero who does such a powerful and important act for the people empowers, I believe, I like to think, empowers women to say, hey, we're just as strong and of equal value and have a gift to give that's at least as equal as the male gender.
Well, thank you for that story. If I can ask you, if there's one thing that listeners can take with them about the nature of story or the power of story, especially in our changing world and those kinds of challenges that we're meeting now, what would be that one thing they could take away about the nature or power of story?
I go back to sort of paraphrase or quote Greg Saris, who's the tribal chief of the Miwok Indians, or formerly called the Federated Indians of Grattan Rancheria. They embody the Southern Pomo and Miwoks. And Greg speaks a lot about storytelling and the need to tell a new story, to re-story the landscape that perhaps touches into Native wisdom and that can help us solve the environmental challenges that are in our face right now. If we don't find a new story, if we don't find a new way of being in relationship with the planet and with each other, there's a good chance the whole ship is going to go down. So power of story is to perhaps in this case touch into the native indigenous wisdom, not just native Miwok or American Indian, but indigenous shamanic earth-centered wisdom from all over the earth, to write that new narrative, compose a new story that tells about changing civilization's relationship with the natural world from one of exploitation to one of respect, and how to care for it and how to be with it in a way that sustains all life, ours as well as plants, animals, rocks, whole 9 yards.
That's really thought-provoking, restoring our landscape. I think that's touched a lot of people, and I want to thank you very much. Wonderful stories in this very sacred space, and shared with us the power and nature of story and how it might help us meet the challenges, come together in community for the things that we care about. Story is very powerful indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Discover more about your place among the wild things. Experience, explore, connect. I'm Gina Farr. Thanks for listening. This conversation is a feature of wildsoundstories.com.